These green hills and silver waters are my home. They belong to me. And to all of her sons and daughters, may they be strong and forever free. Let us live to protect her beauty and look with pride on the golden dome. They say home is where the heart is. These green mountains are my home. These green mountains are my home. These green mountains are my home.
Come here today and gathered in front of the State House to fulfill our long-ago promise to the unborn, that we will commemorate this sad anniversary each year, despite the cold, despite the COVID, and we commit to continuing to remind Vermonters, as well as the lawmakers who govern our state, that every abortion stops a bleeding heart, and we pledge by our presence here today that we will not be silent, and that we will never, ever, ever give up the effort to restore justice for the unborn. Thank
you. Welcome and greetings from snowy Vermont for the Right to Life Committee. This is an exclusive interview to commemorate the anniversary of Roe versus Wade for our annual Rally for Life 2021 in Montpelier, which is partly virtual. For more information, go to vrlc.net. Again, that's vrlc.net. Thank you for watching, and you won't want to miss this moment, and it begins right now. I'm Joanna Turner Baseglio. I'm an avid adventurer with my family here in the Green Mountain State. I believe that life empowers us and that women deserve better than abortion, and that we need to come alongside with women shoulder to shoulder and to share the truth with love. Every January since 1973, at least hundreds of peaceful Vermonters gather to stand for life in Montpelier, kind of a micro model of the March for Life in Washington, which is the largest and longest running peaceful civil rights demonstration in the United States, striving to change hearts on the issue of abortion and protecting innocent human life. With this year's virtual platform, we're having a much wider reach than ever before here in Vermont to have this essential conversation. Finally, please do mark your calendars for October 2nd, 2021. This year, again, October 2nd, 2021, we'll be having a life symposium, which is going to focus on understanding the issues impacting human life at the crossroads of law, medicine, and your community. So that'll be in Burlington, Vermont, coming up. So I'm here with Melissa Oden. It's a real privilege to have you with us, Melissa. And when Right to Life asked me to interview, I was honored. I got to introduce you at our beautiful State House back in 2013, and it's great to see you again. Yours is an incredibly painful yet powerful story, and I want to personally thank you for your vulnerability and the courage that you have to share it. Just by a little way of introduction here, Melissa Oden is a survivor of a failed abortion in 1977. Despite the initial concerns regarding Melissa's future after surviving the attempt to end her life at approximately 7 months of gestation, she not only has survived, but thrived. With a master's degree in social work, she has worked in the fields of substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, and sexual assault counseling and child welfare. She's also an author of a daughter's memoir, You Carried Me, a daughter's memoir. Her second book, which focuses on abortion survivors breaking their silence, will be published this year. Awesome, we look forward to that. She is the founder and director of the Abortion Survivors Network, the only healing and advocacy organization for abortion survivors, Melissa and her team have connected with at least 356 survivors. I'm sure that number goes up by day by day. This was as of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, your story is relevant and so foundational in our society because, as we know, if we don't have life, we don't have anything. And the truth is that the unborn child, each one, is a unique and unrepeatable life, and that late-term abortions happen, they are a reality, and these silent victims need to be spoken for. But that's enough from me. So Melissa, take it away. What would you like to share with us today?
I do want, your supporters there in Vermont to know that I don't forget everyone. I don't forget the places that I've been, and I don't forget the fight that people have been engaged in over the past 7 years. So I know in particular Vermont has fought a very hard fight when it comes to abortion. And I think what we've seen happen in Vermont is, I think, indicative of what we are going to see in the days to come across many states. As hard as that is for us to see, I think I want people to be encouraged to know that, watching you all fight this fight means that every single one of us can continue that fight.
Thank you, and welcome back to Vermont, virtually. So good to have you.
Easier this way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what can you share with us about your story?
Yeah, and I love that you talked about the fact that it's relevant. I think that's an important point. I have spent more years than I can count now being told by abortion supporters, by pro-abortion legislators that I'm no longer relevant. I mean, I literally have sat before Congress and had people say, you aren't relevant to this conversation. Yes, I am. The fact that a saline infusion abortion, which is what I survived, is not performed routinely anymore does not somehow negate me from this conversation or this battle. And I think the fact that people want to try to box survivors like me, so those that survived saline infusion abortions, somehow put us in a box and say, well, they are not important to this conversation anymore. Because why? Because right. We're a sign of the humanity of the unborn, because you've perfected abortion procedures to make sure that people like us don't exist anymore. I mean, if we go down that rabbit hole, there's a lot of responses to that. So I thank you for indicating what we know to be true. Every abortion survivor is relevant in this conversation. Just as every child who unfortunately loses their life to abortion is still relevant to this conversation. So for people who aren't aware, I am a saline abortion survivor. There tended to be a lot of us back in the 1970s. We're going to be putting out a lot of research in journals to help educate people about that, because it's been talked about for decades. So, sadly, we know that I soaked in a toxic salt solution for a 5-day period. Typically, that procedure was only supposed to last about 3 days. If the child was fortunate enough, their life was ended within about the first 24 hours. And then the next 2 days were spent inducing labor with the intent of that deceased child being expelled from the womb. But we know through my medical records that they just could not successfully induce my birth mother's labor. So they kept trying and did not succeed until the 5th day. So, by all intents and purposes, they believed that the abortion had been successful. It should have been in the human sense of things, but, my life was miraculously spared. On the 5th day, my birth mother, Ruth's labor was induced, and I was accidentally born alive that day.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, thank God for that. And as you mentioned, right, we live in a world that says circumstances like mine don't happen. If they do, they're such a rarity. But the reality is, we know that even looking at Guttmacher Institute's own research, they've identified that many late-term abortions happen because women don't know how far along they are in their pregnancy. And I can tell you, Joanna, I hear this on a regular basis from abortion survivors and even their families who say, you know what, we went in for the abortion, the abortionist estimated that I was, less than 20 weeks, and they started the abortion procedure, and guess what? They couldn't complete it in that manner because I was much further along. Or, they started to, perform a vacuum aspiration and the baby's head was too big. We had a little guy born early on in the pandemic in the spring of 2020 that I was contacted about at the Abortion Survivors Network, born at 25 weeks because the abortionist did not accurately assess how far along in the pregnancy the mother was. And mom was in a lot of physical pain and, thankfully found people in the pro-life movement to support her. But, the abortionist's response to that was, if I find out that you're further along than what I thought, you're going to owe me more money. That is the reality of what so many people are facing still today.
Not to mention these pain-capable babies. Could we talk about that?
Yeah, the doctors have said for those of us that survive abortions, and then of course we know those who don't, the amount of pain that we suffer is just excruciating. A lot of people have questions for me, what is the long-term effect then for me? And, by and large, I am very healthy, but that was not the case initially for me. I suffered from seizures, severe respiratory problems, liver problems. The doctors thought I had a fatal heart defect because I was presenting with so much distress. And the more I work with my population of survivors and the more I study research, we know that children in the womb experience the stress that their mothers are going through. And then the stress of a horrific abortion procedure, I was being burned alive for 5 days. I know my body bears memory of that. So I'm now on my 13th round of shingles. I don't need anybody to feel sorry for me. It's okay. But I want to share that in the context that this is my continuous effect of surviving that abortion. The doctors have said the amount of stress my body was put under continues to manifest itself on a regular basis. So for many survivors, our bodies are just constantly under stress. But it points back to exactly what you talked about, Joanna, is, the amount of pain that children are suffering in the womb.
Which brings us to the point of their humanity. And here you are, the face of all those children who we don't get to hear. You're living proof that the unborn child is human, in case we didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
Like, hello.
Memo sent.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's an interesting cognitive dissonance that exists in our world, right? Mm-hmm. We see that, and I think as the pro-life movement, right, we very graciously point that out to people of, we seem to talk about the identity of the child in the womb when it's convenient, when they're wanted. I see that so often in the news. Oh, they're having a baby. Oh, well, it's suddenly a baby then, but it's not a baby under other circumstances.
Right.
And so we know that, right? That the way that people feel about us or whether a child is deemed wanted or unwanted does not change who they are.
How can we be more shoulder to shoulder with these women who are facing crisis pregnancies, who they don't feel loved and supported, and often feel pressured, or like they have no other option economically or whatever? How can we come shoulder to shoulder with them so that no woman has to walk alone and feel that pressure?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the question the whole world should be asking, whether they identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that should be something everybody should get behind. No woman should be coerced. No woman should be forced, like my birth mother. Every woman should know that there are true choices that exist, that pregnancy centers are available, right? We should be working to systemically address the issues that drive women to abortion. We should be talking about domestic violence in pregnancies, right? We should be talking about all of these things. But yet abortion is sold as the only option. And I'm sure, like me, I regularly put myself in the shoes of other women and think, you know what, if I was a young woman without support in today's culture, would I know that there was any other choice? I think for so many women, they wouldn't, unless we have, a pregnancy center or a community that they're somehow Googling in that has really great SEO capabilities, right? That they're being bumped up on the search engine. But, all that to say, right? Pro-life information and resources can be so deeply buried by big tech, by a culture that is predominantly pro-abortion. And as much as those are obstacles, I do also see that as a great opportunity for us to work smarter, not harder. Yes, we all work hard. We're going to continue to work hard.
Sure.
But it means we do need to work smart, right? We need to know how to get that information in the hands of women in need. It means we really need to think about the organizations that we have in our communities and, know who's doing what and collaborate. Man, we need to keep collaborating, building and building and building systems that work together efficiently. Because that is ultimately how we are going to make abortion unthinkable, by humanizing the unborn, but also by creating this culture that is so supportive of people and what they're going through that it makes abortion the option that is not considered.
We've dehumanized a whole class of people. And I'm like, why? Because we're powerful enough to walk over them to what our need is, whether that's to escape the pressure or, but to humanize them, hearing the heartbeat. I've heard even within my friends and family circle of people that were unexpectedly pregnant, and they went in to just find out what's going on and had their ultrasound where they were allowed to hear the heartbeat, and just most people like have a tear and are like, there's my child like speaking to me. And that's not even a late term abortion, when the baby's all like formed and just needs a little more time to develop before they're born. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm emotional. Like I'm teary just thinking about, when I heard my daughter's heartbeats for the first time. It is just the sound that you will never, ever forget.
It's like, there you are. Yeah. I hear you. You're talking to me.
Exactly.
There's your little self, your little body.
Yeah. And how frustrating it is for all of us, right? That we live in a culture that somehow says, no, 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 no. You are not going to do that. Mm-hmm. You are not going to allow them to hear the heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
Because the truth is powerful.
You're absolutely right that we need to work smarter, not harder. And I was so disappointed when in the Super Bowl, your Faces ad was blocked. And again, it's like, why? Because it's just too uncomfortable, because what the truth is so uncomfortable. Can you tell me about that ad? And we will play it not during this interview, but we'll be playing it on the Vermont Right to Life broadcast for the Rally for Life. Can you tell us about what inspired you to put that together and why it was turned down?
I was working on the Face the Choice ad with the founder of Faces of Choice, Lyric Gillette. It was her brainchild. She had actually approached me years ago about it, and I kept saying, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea, but come on, right. Can't pull that off." And she was so optimistic and kept saying, "Melissa, the time is now." And so it was really her concept, and I helped find the survivors and prepare them. And then we worked for, about a year to try to get it to go to the Super Bowl through Fox. And, people will probably remember that I unveiled it at the March for Life last year in DC because it was not accepted to be run by Fox. And certainly there's been some verbal jockeying, I guess you could say, about, well, we didn't exactly decline it. Well, you didn't also, accept it. And I can tell you, by having lived through that process, it was so clear that it was a very well orchestrated maneuvering to make it unable to happen, but yet also not directly tell us no, right? We know it when it's happening. And it was so obvious to see how it happened. But the Face the Choice ad campaign is the first time that anybody has ever seen multiple abortion survivors in any kind of ad campaign, and really, asking people to face the choice. When our world wants to call
Literally.
abortion a choice and a right, what they're talking about is a human being every single time. This is not just a word. We're going to take it back. I truly believe, as the pro-life movement and as abortion survivors in particular, we're going to take that word back. When you say choice and you're talking about abortion, you're not talking about choice, you're talking about a human being. And we have a name, we have a face. Not everyone has a voice, but guess what? We are going to be a voice. The whole pro-life movement has been that voice now for, almost 50 years. So we have to take that language back. And that was really our first great opportunity as a large group of survivors to say, no, you know what, this is what choice looks like.
Right.
And if
and
we
it has
can,
a name. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and if we can be bold enough to do that, I know that, everybody in Vermont and anybody else tuning in from other states can, find the same strength to be bold about this.
And what can you tell us about your organization and like how have you connected with these abortion survivors and what has moved you about their story?
Yeah, this is where my hope comes. It's been an interesting process for me. 2020, of course, changed everybody's lives, and what it did was really put me in a place where I was home more, which I know needed to happen because it allowed me to grow the organization. And so we now provide a specialized healing curriculum that I wrote. My master's degree is in social work. You know what? God put me on this path, right, to do this very thing. And so we have a specialized healing curriculum that we offer small groups through. We do one-on-one healing support. We have a retreat happening. We have never had a face-to-face meeting of abortion survivors in the United States ever. And we're doing it. We've postponed it a couple times, but we're going to do a virtual retreat in February, and then we're going to do an in-person this summer where we help people with their healing, but also equip and empower them to use their voice. We also now have an education and policy center where we're going to be putting up the decades of research about abortion survivors. I was just reading a report yesterday where they did one study. And in this study, decades ago, there were 38 survivors in a sample of 150,000 abortions.
Wow.
Think about how many tens of millions of abortions we've had.
Right, over 60 million in the United States alone.
Exactly. So we have a culture that is full of abortion survivors. Some don't know it. Some don't talk about it. And so really it's exciting to me because, as you shared in my introduction, we are the only advocacy and support group for survivors. So not every survivor is ever going to share their story like me, but we want to heal and support survivors so that they know that they are loved and worthy for who they are. And if they feel called to share their story, whether it's something small or something big, they're going to have the tools they need to do it. And so you're going to see and hear more people like me. I think that's the coolest thing that I see happening every single day is, a survivor who has said, I'm never going to share my story publicly, right? I mean, I'm going to be supported. I'm finding friendship and this is life-changing, but I'm never going to share my story. And then a few months later, they're healing and growing stronger and they go, let me at them. I'm ready. I'm going to do this.
Right. That's awesome. I can only understand from an empathetic standpoint why it's hard enough for women to share or men to share how abortion has hurt them and that they always track that birthday of the child that they would have had when they see that 6-year-old holding their dad's hand or their mom's hand, you know what I mean? The shockwaves of abortion are amazing. But I can understand how even someone who survived having an abortion would hesitate. I can only imagine how much more psychologically complex and how much more physically and emotionally and spiritually hurtful it is to have been a survivor of an abortion because the attempt on your life was made on purpose.
Yeah, it's a very complicated experience. It's always been interesting. The media in particular has always kind of pointedly asked me, well, if there are all these abortion survivors, where are they? Why aren't they sharing their story? I could name you 20 reasons right now. And in reality, why should every survivor have to share their story? Do we have to share a story to prove that we exist? How incredibly traumatic.
Right.
So that's why the role of your supporters are so important, because in many respects, many survivors are living behind the scenes and need us to be their voice. And I get those messages a lot from survivors who say, oh my goodness, I am never, ever, ever going to share my story, but thank you for doing it on my behalf.
Right.
They're worth fighting for.
They are worth fighting for. As we wrap up, let's see, I think we're getting to near the end of our time, Melissa. I want to thank you again for being here with us in Vermont in the Sanctity of Life month, and remind us how we can learn more about your work and about these survivor stories, about where to go.
My personal website is melissaoden, OHDEN.com. The Abortion Survivors Network is abortionsurvivors.org. I have to think about it because we've changed it a little bit. Our Education and Policy Center for the Abortion Survivors Network is just educationandpolicy.com. People can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are on Parler. We are experimenting with new ways of communicating. So again, obstacles are opportunities.
Obstacles are opportunities, and yeah, keep us posted through those media. If there's other media that we need to be tuning into to ensure that we can keep, getting the message out and hearing these stories. Finally, I'd really like to end the program, Melissa, with just a little recap from you, and would like your takeaway message. What would you like our viewers to know? And 1 to 2 minute wrap up. As we go home, to know, what do you want them to remember and to carry forward this year?
I think people remember my story because it tends to be quite dramatic, right? I survived a saline infusion abortion that was probably more like 31 weeks as opposed to the 20 that the abortionist had indicated. And the abortion was forced upon my birth mother, Ruth. And we now know that she spent over 30 years of her life not knowing that I had survived. My survival was kept a secret. That's dramatic. But I want people to understand and remember that stories like mine are lived out on a daily basis. An abortion survivor is very different from person to person. So not everybody survived the type of procedure I did, but I work with survivors as old as in their 80s to babies who are surviving abortions still today. And every single one of those survivors' lives are just as important as mine, just as every child in the womb has dignity and value. They will never be made again, just as they are. That's how unique we are as individuals. I know we all know this, but I think it bears repeating, right? We should shout that from the rooftops. There will never be another you. There will never be another me. And so I share that because I think that gives us a glimpse of where we need to go. When people want to dehumanize the unborn, they want to dehumanize survivors, they want to dehumanize women who have had abortions. We need to put the humanity back into every single one of those lives and experiences. And we do that with love. We care enough about our world and every single one of those people to share the truth with them. And so we shouldn't be ashamed or afraid of the truth. And we shouldn't be ashamed or afraid of our beliefs and our passions. And so I just want to encourage people to be bold, to know that we are on the right side of things and that together we really will continue to make a difference. I am so sure of that in an uncertain world.
Amen. Well said, Melissa. Thanks again for joining us at the Vermont Right to Life Rally 2021, Rally for Life, and God bless you.
Thank you.